The Stand. It was a late afternoon in downtown New Orleans. The sky was painted with the last golden hues of sunset, and the streets were bustling with the typical hum of life. Among the crowd, a man named Marcus Stokes, a father of two and a local mechanic, was making his way home. He had just finished a long shift at the auto shop and was ready to relax with his family. As Marcus walked down the sidewalk, his head was down, lost in thought about the week ahead, but a sharp, sudden voice broke through the air. "Hey, you!" a police officer called out, his hand raised. Marcus stopped in his tracks, his stomach turning. He knew what was coming. "Yeah, you. Step over here," the officer said, his tone clipped and hostile. Marcus could feel the tension in the air as another cop approached. They were already sizing him up. He was a black man, and that alone seemed to make him a target. It wasn't the first time he'd been pulled over or stopped for reasons he knew were unjustified. But today was different. Marcus stood his ground. "What's going on?" "I haven't done anything wrong." His voice was calm but firm. "You fit the description of someone we're looking for," the officer responded, though he didn't offer any further explanation. The second cop, now standing behind him, crossed his arms. Eyeing Marcus like he was prey, the crowd began to gather around, sensing something was about to unfold. A couple of people murmured, some took out their phones. Marcus, aware of the growing attention, felt a surge of both fear and resolve. He had seen this happen to too many men who looked like him: harassment, violence, and humiliation. He wasn't going to let it happen to him today. "Why am I being stopped?" Marcus asked, his voice carrying more weight now. The officers exchanged a glance, their faces hardening. One of them stepped forward, pushing Marcus against a nearby lamppost. "Shut up and get in the car," the officer growled. Something snapped inside Marcus. The anger, the injustice, the countless times he had seen this play out, all came to a boiling point. Without thinking, he pushed back. A small but defiant shove that sent the officer stumbling. The crowd gasped. "Don't touch me," Marcus shouted, his chest heaving. For the first time, he felt empowered, like the years of tension and frustration were finally being channeled into something real. The officers reacted quickly, one pulling out his baton. "You're resisting arrest," he barked, swinging the stick at Marcus. But Marcus dodged it, his instincts kicking in. The crowd erupted, some cheering, others filming. It was as if the world had paused for a moment, and the struggle wasn't just his. It was the collective fight for justice. Then, something remarkable happened. One of the officers hesitated, lowering his baton just slightly. The momentary pause gave Marcus the chance to push forward, knocking the baton from the officer's hand. He didn't fight to hurt, but to defend his dignity. He wasn't backing down, and then the crowd roared. A man in the crowd shouted, "You got this!" Another woman screamed, "Fight back!" The energy shifted. This was no longer a fight between Marcus and the officers. It was a movement, an eruption of pent-up frustration that spread through the streets within seconds. The officers realized they were losing control of the situation. Other law enforcement officers arrived on the scene, but the mood had changed. People were no longer passive. They had seen too many of their brothers, sisters, and neighbors oppressed and violated. This time, they weren't standing idly by a senior officer. Realizing the growing danger of the situation, stepped forward and called for a retreat. "Let him go," he ordered. The officers backed off, and Marcus stood tall, breathing heavily but unbroken. He had faced down the system that had targeted him and come out the other side with his dignity intact. The crowd erupted in applause, chanting his name. Marcus looked around at the faces of people who had never met him, but who now shared in his victory. The officers, realizing they were no longer the power in this moment, dispersed without another word. Marcus walked away, head held high, as the crowd continued to cheer. His heart was pounding, but there was a fire in him that hadn't been there before. He had stood up for himself, for his community, and for everyone who had been unjustly treated. He didn't just fight back against two racist cops. He had sparked something much bigger, a movement, a reminder that sometimes, when we refuse to be silenced, the world has no choice but to listen. As he walked home that evening, the sky had turned from gold to deep purple, but Marcus was no longer just a man walking in the city. He was a symbol of resistance, a beacon for those who had been oppressed and silenced. The cheers of the crowd echoed in his mind as he entered his home, greeted by his children's laughter, and knew that change had begun one stand at a time.